All right, hello. Today we're going to be talking about identifying a thesis statement for when you are writing an essay. So this is part of my ongoing How to Write an Essay series, and so today is going to be talking about what is a thesis statement, ways to find your thesis statement, and then ways to write it. So let's get started here. So first things first, what is a thesis statement? So for an essay, a thesis statement is your opinion or position, your stance on the subject that you are writing about. If your teacher, professor, whoever gives you a question, this is usually the answer or at least part of the answer. When it comes to a thesis statement, think of it as kind of the main hub or the main idea of your essay. Because then, as you are writing it, everything must tie back to that thesis statement. If it does not help prove that your opinion, your position, your stance is correct, then don't use it. And if you get to the point where there is just so much information that you need to adjust your thesis statement, do that kind of a deal. Okay. So basically, it is the main idea. It's the main subject. It is what your whole paper is about. Everything goes back to that thesis statement, which is why finding a thesis statement early on, even if it is kind of a not well written one, as long as you know what you want to talk about, you're going to be fine. All right, so last video or last presentation that we did was over brainstorming and how to brainstorm for an essay, because I think that is the most important part of writing an essay is actually figuring out, okay, what do I want to write about? Because a lot of kids just kind of start writing without any direction, and then they either find that direction later on in their essay and they don't revise, they don't make better, or they just write something that doesn't have a position to it, it doesn't have a stance, it doesn't have your own point of view in it, and it's really, really boring. And it's not really an essay. And so, when it comes to that brainstorming part, you're going to probably have to do a little bit of research, a little bit of soul searching, depending on what kind of essay it is. If it's a literature one, that again, that research goes back to looking through the text, looking through maybe some history kind of deals and some author information, those kinds of things. And that can be your research. Some research might just be your own personal thoughts, own most personal feelings, and trying to get those down on paper, especially for an argument based one or a debate. You want to get your opinion out there. And then start backing it up with evidence. And you might find that there's not a lot of evidence to back up your own opinion, and you might need to change it depending on what that subject is. Remember that a thesis should include an opinion or your position, um, and so it'll have your opinion in it. Now, one thing we'll talk about here later on is that just because it is your opinion, you don't need to say things like "I believe" or "I think" or those kind of deals. You don't need those in there because you're the author. We know this is your opinion. Okay, so you're by doing that, you're almost dumbing it down, and you're being very redundant, and it's not necessary. So when you are brainstorming, you might have an idea, and then you start writing. And when you start writing, you'll probably have to do more research because no one compiles all their research at one time and then goes, all right, I am done doing research. It's an ongoing kind of process. And as you keep going through that research part of this, you might realize, oh, what I want to write now isn't necessarily what is going to be the correct answer or isn't going to be what the essay is about now based on the thesis statement. So you might need to go back and adjust that thesis later, and that's totally okay. That is the writing process. And if you're someone who is very stick to your guns kind of thing, that's not going to work. It really won't, especially maybe not as much junior high, but later on in high school and beginning of college, that kind of writing isn't going to fly. Um, and even if it is a literature essay, because you have to argue something, and so once you start figuring out the research and those kind of things, your opinion should change, and as long as you have an open mind for those changes, you should be good. So my example down here is, oh, I can't click apparently. Example here is if I was doing research on why students struggle going from junior high to high school, because every test score shows that there is a big difference between 8th grade and 9th grade. There's also one between 6th grade and 7th grade for entertainment as well, because they're going from elementary to junior high, and we got another jump from junior high to high school. And so an essay could be written on, well, why is that? What do you think that is? What's the reasoning for that? And so if I was doing research, my brainstorming part might, I might just automatically think like, oh, teachers in high school give out more schoolwork, and kids aren't prepared for all that schoolwork and those kind of deals. However, after doing more research and maybe doing a couple, if I'm doing this for Northamen specifically, I might look at, test data, I might look at teacher um, homework rates and those kind of things, and I might realize, oh, maybe that's not the case. Maybe it is more the idea that you have more freedom because you can choose your classes, and you're not all in one central hub. You're on 2 different floors, and there's a lot more freedom when it comes to high school. And maybe it's grades didn't matter as much in junior high as they do in high school, and I could probably find a lot of different reasons why as I am doing research. And so I hope that my thesis would adjust, would change, would become better because of that. And so the old thesis here is many high school freshmen struggle during their first semester because they have trouble adjusting to the amount of work required by their teachers. And then by doing research, I come to the conclusion that many high school freshmen struggle during their first semester because of the freedoms they have received. They don't give enough attention to their academics. And so I'm just adjusting it just a little bit. I'm still talking about academics. I'm still talking about not, maybe it's not the amount. Now it's more the actual time given to it. Maybe it takes more time and they're not used to that. And so I adjusted just a little bit, but it changes my essay almost entirely. All right. So after your brainstorming is done, I think, in my opinion, I think the thesis statement should be probably the first thing that you write for your paper. As you will see here in a little bit, it usually goes at the end of an introduction. That's the typical essay format. But I would write that first because everything else ties to that. You can write an introduction later on. You can write the rest of the paper later on, obviously. But you got to have that thesis statement. It is the most important 1 to 2 sentences in your paper. I say 1 to 2 because for a bigger paper, it might be 2 sentences. But honestly, for the papers that you're going to be writing, probably first 2 years of high school, maybe even your junior year one, you can get it into 1 sentence. I say that because most of the time when you do a 2-sentence, and I'm using quotes here, 2-sentence thesis statement, you can dwindle it down to 1 sentence. It's very easy to do. Now, there are 2 parts to an effective thesis statement to make it actually click with your audience, with your reader, those kind of things. The first one is the limited, and notice how that is in italics there, the limited subject of the paper, and then also your point of view, your attitude or your opinion or position on the subject. So, for example, let's say I have the topic or the subject of education. There are books upon books upon books upon books about the education field. So the question is, okay, well, education is one big honking thing. How am I going to narrow that down? Well, as you see here, you could write about a lot of different things year-round school. You could write about homework. You could write about teacher salaries, cell phones, state tests. And even within some of those, some of these are still a little too vague as well, and are a little too big, and they will need to be dwindled down just a little bit more. But we call education part the general subject, and we call all the ones in blue the limited subjects. And even then, you could even make it even more limited down to one thing. Homework, for example, you could talk about, should homework be graded? That could be one paper in and of itself. There's probably books about that. Should homework be mandatory? There's probably books and essays written about that. Cell phones, should they be allowed in schools? There's a whole list about that. Should they be used as a tool in schools? There's a whole things about that. And so some of these can be even dwindled down even more. So your limited subject is one of these things. And then you need to bring in your opinion, your stance, your point of view. So you can't just say homework, homework, this essay is about homework. You need to have your opinion attached to it. And so when it comes to those, that is how you get it to become an essay. You need to have your opinion. You need to have your point of view, your stance, your position, all those kind of things in your thesis statement. All those are kind of the same thing. And so however way you want to say it, go for it. So going back to that thesis statement that I wrote earlier, many high school freshmen struggle during their first semester because of the freedoms they have received. They don't give enough attention to their academics. So as you notice there, my limited subject is high school freshman academics. Because high school freshmen, I could write, I could go in a lot of different directions, even within freshmen. So then I narrowed it down even more to academics. And so the struggle, because of the freedoms they have received, that's my opinion. That's my stance on that subject. If someone were to ask me, because you could ask Mr. Meister, you could ask other teachers, why do you think freshmen struggle? Someone could say hormones. Someone could say they're lazy. Someone could say it's too much work. Some could say there's just an adjustment, kind of a deal. Someone could say there is no difference, kind of a deal. And so that part is my stance. So the blue is the limited subject, and the pink part or red part is my opinion, my stance, my point of view on that thesis statement. All right, so plan of development. This is probably where a lot of students do a thesis statement. This is what a lot of students use for a thesis statement. This is where this actually spells out exactly what you're going to talk about in your essay in the order that you will present it in. That is very, very key. I see people, and this is your, homework shouldn't be graded because of A, B, and C. And so, and then in your paper, you start with B, and then you go to A, then you go to C. And it's like, no, why did you switch them up? And it might just be a writing part. It might just be I want to write about this subject first, and then I didn't put it first in my thesis statement. Whatever it is, you need to put them in the order that they are going to be presented in, because then that helps the reader go along with you, and they know, okay, we're transitioning now to your second idea, your second argument, kind of a deal, and then you keep going. So I'm not saying this is a bad way to write a thesis statement. I think it can be used as a crutch. I think it can be overused. But if it's done correctly, I think it can be a major part of an essay, especially a longer essay that you need to kind of work yourself into and write a little bit more, kind of deal. If it's just like a one page, a couple paragraph essay, you probably don't need to have all your reasons listed out. But for longer papers, it might help your reader kind of go from topic to topic. And some essays are better with this, and some maybe don't need it as much because there's not like three distinct reasons why kind of a deal. And maybe it's just kind of a cause effect. Maybe it's a compare contrast. And so you can't really do this. However, one of the many problems that I see here with using this kind of plan of development is that you overload, you overshare in the thesis statement. You write out these very long-winded, over punctuated, run on times infinity kind of sentences when it should be very concise and very straight to the point in your thesis statement. And I will say that a lot of teachers that I know, they like it when you have this plan of development. That way, especially if for like rough drafts and stuff like that, because then, for me personally, I can go, okay, this student is going to talk about A, B, and C, and then I go into your paper and there is D and E and F and G and H, and it's like, no, wait, where are those coming from? How do they tie back to your thing? So it is a great way that for teachers to kind of maybe see if you're on the right track and to make sure that everything goes back to that thesis statement. Just make sure that every reason is concise and straight to the point. So here's my example. The first one on the left here is the overwritten one. An after-school job can promote a sense of responsibility in young people, teach important human relation skills, and an awareness of career options. So already, I'm looking at the phrase "in young people" here, and I know it's for young people because it's an after-school job. And I don't think I need to know like teenagers. I don't think I need to know young adults. I don't need any of those kind of things, because based on this, and you probably have it somewhere else in your introduction as well, that this is who you're talking about. And so, a more concise way of saying this is an after-school job develops responsibility, human relationship skills, and an awareness of career options. And so I listed 1, 2, 3 right there. I mean, it is just a very concise, very straight to the point kind of a sentence, which is great. So do be more like this one than like this one, okay? I know a lot of you, especially a lot of students, very type A students, need to know how long does the paper have to be? How many words? Those kind of deals, okay? For the most part, I would say most of my teachers and most of the teachers that I've had, especially in college, don't really care about that. One of the ones that I have right now actually is like, it should be around 1,000 words. Well, I've had ones that have gone under, and I've had essays that have gone over, and I've gotten the same grade. So I don't know if it necessarily matters. It's got to be kind of in the ballpark. And if you can do it more concise, that is less reading your teacher has to do, and they'll be happier. Easy as that. So, other tips and tricks. 1, don't be overly opinionated. If you are calling out people or calling out ideas and you're being very negative, you're using very negative kind of words, very positive kind of words, I call it being very clickbaity. Don't be clickbaity, okay? Sound professional, state your opinion, but again, you don't want to sound like an idiot. And I think a lot of times people online nowadays, especially on like your Facebook, your YouTube, your Twitter, if you are trying to argue with someone and you are name calling and you're doing those kind of things, you've already lost your argument, because they're going to shut down the moment you call them an idiot. They're going to shut down the moment you get overly opinionated. And so one of the ways to kind of reverse that is to be a little more professional and to sound more, I don't want to say unbiased, but sound more like, hey, I'm not calling you out. I'm saying that this is what I believe, kind of a deal. And so make sure you do that in your essays as well. Don't make it an announcement. You are all guilty, and I think I probably am too. My essay will talk about, or I think, or I believe, for the most part, I would say 90% of the time, you don't need those statements in there. You don't need to have first person there at all, because I know you're the writer of it. I can see your name and the title and those kind of things. I know it's you. I know it's your opinion. Because that's what an essay is. It's an opinion-based form of writing. So you don't need it. So for example, if you say, I think homework should be eliminated from North Tama because A, B, and C. Get rid of that I think or I believe. Homework should be eliminated from North Tama for A, B, and C. It gives it just a little more of an oomph to it, and it's not just a I think this. It is a no, this is the right answer. I'm right, you're wrong kind of a deal. It gives it a little more strength, and it takes out the opinion part of it, and it makes it almost feel less opinionated, which is good. You don't want it to be opinionated. Okay? Some more tips here. Don't write a factual statement. This sounds weird. I think you're like, well, you want it to be factual. You do. But it's an opinion. And if there wasn't another side to kind of argue against you or to kind of go against your position or your stance, or your stance wasn't the only right one, then why write it? I think that's kind of what people forget, is that just because you're writing this essay doesn't mean that you are the one correct answer out of everyone else, kind of a deal. Even in things like literature or science or math or whatever it is, there's not one right answer. And there's a lot of different philosophies, there's a lot of different outlooks, and so just kind of making sure that you have your point of view in there, okay? If you just state a factual statement, it's like, okay, great. Now what? And there's nothing like that. So my example here, down here, America's population is growing older. Okay. So what? Who cares? I don't want to say who cares, but who cares? I mean, it's so think about, if you have a fact, think about what argument can you make because of that fact. So because America's population is growing older, blah 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 blah. What do you think is going to happen? It could be Social Security. It could be jobs opening up. I mean, and you can go a lot of different directions with that one too. Okay. So now that you have written a nice, solid one sentence, not overly opinionated, non-first person, no factual statement, kind of a thesis, you need to put it somewhere. I would write it first, but when you put your paper together, it usually goes at the end of an introduction. That's the classic traditional way of doing it. There are exceptions to that rule, but one of the things that I always talk about when it comes to essay writing is that you have to know the basics first in order to be the exception to the rule. Sometimes more, I would say more your upper high school, like senior year of college, you might start playing around with that, especially if you are a good writer, trying to figure out where else to put the thesis statement at. Sometimes it goes at the very end of a paper. Maybe you ask a question, and then as you're doing information, then your answer at the bottom. I've seen that before. Sometimes it goes after a couple paragraphs because you need to set up your paper with more background information. Maybe it's a very complicated subject that your audience needs to know more about. Chances are most of the papers that you write in high school, your introduction can have that background information in a couple sentences. You don't need a whole lot in your high school ones. I would say most of your teachers will expect that thesis statement to be at the very, very end of your introduction. Play around with it later on, but also be able to justify why you did it. I think that's going to be the biggest thing, because if, let's say, Hampton or myself or Mies, they're like, oh, I'm going to give you a lower grade because your thesis wasn't in the right spot. If you can argue and defend why you put it where you put it, then that's great. I think most of the time we would dock you points because we just kind of figure, oh, you don't know where a thesis statement should go, and so there you go. So be able to defend your answer and defend your writing, which is always something that you should be willing to do anyway. Yeah. All right, so quiz time. So, as you see here, there are 4 statements that are different kinds of thesis statements. One is a nice, solid thesis statement. One is just the facts. One has an announcement in it, and one is a little too broad. And so, what I want you to do is, you can pause this video, figure out which one is which. Which one is the announcement, which one is the too broad one, which one's just the fact, and which one is the best one. So pause the video, and then I'll give you the answers. Okay, so let's look at this first one. Some babies born with severe disabilities have been allowed to die. It's kind of a startling fact, but it's just a fact. Who cares? I mean, again, I don't like saying who cares, but who cares? What's the big deal? What's the opinion attached to it? There's no opinion attached to it. You need that opinion for your essay, okay? There are many serious issues involved in the treatment of newborns with disabilities. This one, I would say, is too broad because of the word many. And now it probably depends on what your how long your essay is, what's the requirements for it. This one probably is more of a too broad statement. If you wanted to fix it up and change this one just a little bit to make it kind of in the same vein, but not necessarily the same kind of a deal, I would say, I would at the end of it here, I would do including and then list your three things that like your three or whatever it is that you want to talk about. Or you could say 3 reasons or 3 serious issues involved in the treatment are blah 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 blah, kind of a deal. And also, it doesn't really give your opinion still either, and that deals with the whole "it's too broad" kind of a thing. Going down to the bottom one here, this essay will analyze the controversy surrounding the treatment of severely disabled babies who would die without medical care. This essay will analyze, no, don't do it. Don't do it. No announcements, okay? So the best one here is C. The government should pass legislation requiring medical treatment of newborns with disabilities. So 1, I know you're talking about medical treatment of newborns with disabilities, and 2, I know your stance on that subject. The government should pass legislation. Now, if you wanted to add that plan of, I already forgot what it was called too. If you want to add your plan of development to it, I would simply say because, and then list your reasons. By not doing that, the author can go in a lot of different directions and not be kind of tied down to those 3 reasons. Maybe to start with, if you want those 3 reasons in there for whatever reason, you could start with this one, and as you're writing, figure out what are your main strength arguments for it, and then add those in later on, kind of a deal. Okay? So, I hope that this video helps you figure out some essay stuff. Next week we'll go back into narrative and talk about some narrative stuff. But until then, I will talk to you later.